September 27th, 2021 regular scheduled school board meeting. Before we begin the work of the district, let us stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Superintendent?
Good evening. Board, do you have any additions or deletions, changes to the agenda for this evening?
I want to pull 10.03 for discussion.
Okay. I'm also going to pull policy 5780, which was up for final approval tonight. It needs to go back for some revisions, so it'll come back at a later date. There are no more changes. I'm recommending approval of the minutes from the school board workshop August 30th, 2021, and the special school board meeting September 2nd, 2021.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Good. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0.
Representation. I'll ask Dr. Feltner to come in recognition of National Bullying Prevention Month.
Good evening.
Good evening. And
I have
happy birthday.
tonight- Thank you. I have tonight for you two proclamations. The first being National Bullying Prevention Month, designating October 1st through 31st, 2021 as National Bullying Prevention Month campaign. And the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas bullying is physical, verbal, sexual, or emotional harm or intimidation intentionally directed at a person or group of people, and whereas bullying occurs in neighborhoods, playgrounds, schools, and through technology such as the internet and cell phones, and whereas various researchers have concluded that bullying is the most common form of violence affecting millions of American children and adolescents annually, and whereas Lake County children and adolescents are affected by bullying annually, and whereas targets of bullying are more likely to acquire physical, emotional, and learning problems, and students who are repeatedly bullied often fear such activities as riding the bus, going to school, and attending community activities, and whereas children who bully are at a greater risk of engaging in more serious violent behaviors, and whereas children who witness bullying often feel less secure, more fearful, and intimidated. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the School Board of Lake County, Florida proclaims October as National Bullying Prevention Month, and be it further resolved that students, parents, recreation programs, and community organizations be encouraged to engage in a variety of awareness and prevention activities designed to make our communities safer for all children and adolescents.
Well done. Thank you.
The second resolution I have is for drug-free lifestyles, and it's designating October 23rd through 31st, 2021 as Red Ribbon Campaign Week. And the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas alcohol and other drug abuse in this nation has reached epidemic stages, and whereas it is imperative that visible, unified prevention education efforts by community members be launched to eliminate the demand for drugs, and whereas the Lake County School Board is sponsoring the Florida Red Ribbon Campaign, offering students and citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyles, no use of illegal drugs, no illegal use of legal drugs, and whereas the National Red Ribbon Campaign will be celebrated in every community in America during Red Ribbon Week, October 23rd through 31st, and whereas business, government, parents, law enforcement, media, medical, religious institutions, schools, senior citizens, service organizations, and youth will demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing and displaying red ribbons during this week-long campaign. And whereas the Lake County School Board further commits its resources to ensure the success of the Red Ribbon Campaign, now therefore be it resolved that the Lake County School Board does hereby proclaim October 23rd through 31st, 2021 as Red Ribbon Campaign Week and encourages its citizens to participate in drug prevention, education activities, making a visible statement that we are strongly committed to a drug-free state. These are the two proclamations I bring before you.
Thank you, Dr. Feltner. Superintendent, you have a recommendation?
Yes. Having heard the resolutions, I recommend approval of Resolution 2021-10, National Bullying Prevention Month for October 2021.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0.
I also recommend approval of Resolution 2021-11, Lake County Schools drug-free lifestyles.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation.
So moved.
Oh, I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Okay, thank you. Public input. Ms. Kathy Smith.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Great, thank you.
I'm Kathy Smith here. I want to just give you some updates of things that have been going on with LCA. And first, I would like to say that we had 5 participants that attended an FEA FIRE training. FIRE stands for Florida Young Remarkable Educators. And they had a training over the weekend, and they're very energized and excited to bring some new ideas to Lake County. Next, LCA had on September 18th, we had our first support Saturday. We had several member organizers attend, and they're going to be doing some activities around, which one of them is to plan a fall event, which would actually go along with the Red Ribbon Week, because they decided to do it on October 23rd for all teachers, and they can come and enjoy some festivities. And on the other hand, I wanted to talk about that teachers are still being overworked. They're overloaded. They're like overwhelmed right now. And they're trying to communicate as best they can some of the things to us as to what is happening. But we need to see hopefully some help along the way with some of the things that are happening with them. And I would also like to say that I'm a chair of a committee at FEA that is called the Teacher Public Policy Council. And FEA is working with the Education Commissioner on the new progress monitoring and what is happening with that. And so FEA has asked the committee to come up with some ideas on what we can do. And so we have been asking Lake County teachers and all over Florida to give us some recommendations so we can compile them and give it to FEA leadership, and then hopefully then they will take it then to Education Commissioner. So if there's anything that you think you might want to, or you find some information, just let me know and I'll gladly add it to my agenda for there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Cronin?
Kim Cronin. Good evening, Superintendent and board members. I just wanted to let you know that, we've got an awful lot of open positions out there. I think that there's quite a few people that are overworked right now at the district. Our bus drivers are doing 2 to 3 runs a day, doubling up. We have teacher assistants that are in covering classes. A lot of if you just look at openings, you'll see for the last few weeks now, we've got probably 5-6 pages of open positions, most of them teacher assistant and custodial positions. Bus driver positions aren't advertised on there, and they probably should be. But, I think this might be just a look at what we've got for the future, because we definitely have a wage problem. It's some people that are here now that are working are here because of kids. But when it gets to the point where they're nervous about, no mask mandates, and now we don't have to quarantine our kids if the parents don't want them to, where is a safer place to go work? Maybe somewhere else, where they can have mask mandates, or they're making more money than what they're making here. So there's a lot of things I think we need to look at, especially the wage issue, because that is going to become a problem. Next year, when the wages go up to $11 an hour, we have people that have been working here for many years doing one of our higher paid jobs that are making $11 an hour. So it's pretty sad right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, sir. The board is going to be hearing a appeal of a termination of an employee before or after the October 11th meeting. I just want to let you know we may have to move that you would be here anyway for the regular board meeting that night, but we may have to move because of an emergency that came up with the attorney who was going to present the case for the superintendent. There's also another employee matter that has requested a hearing and appealing a decision for a suspension without pay. This one has a couple of alternatives of how we can handle it. My recommendation is that we utilize a single board member hearing officer, then that board member will hear the evidence, make the decision, and then goes to the board, a full board at a regular meeting to approve the recommended order of the hearing officer. So if that's amenable to the board, we need to go ahead and make the arrangements to make sure that we can get that done in a timely manner.
Any thoughts?
I think I did the last one. I'm just putting that out there, just in case that needs to be considered.
Man, I thought I did the last one.
When was the last one? It's been a while. It
I
has been a
think
while.
Dr. Burns did the last one, I think.
Boom.
Have you guys done one? Mrs. Cunningham, have you done one yet?
So we're down to Mr. Dodd and Mrs. Cunningham. So I think we do it in.
No, I have
So
not.
first we need to decide if we're going to do it in-house. So does everybody
That
feel,
was the first decision you made.
Yes, we could do it in-house.
okay. So then we need to decide whether Mr. Dodd or Mrs. Cunningham.
When, do we have a date for that, or is it subject
We-
to our availability and schedule?
Yes, sir. It will be subject to whoever the hearing officer's availability.
Okay, yeah, I don't mind.
I don't mind, and I think in-house is good.
So either one of y'all are willing to do it?
Yes.
Okay. So then we're going to do it in-house, and it'll be up to Mr. Dodd or Mrs. Cunningham, whatever your
next.
schedule. Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll
That's
get
all
ours.
Okay, so good. We're done with that. Next?
That's all for me.
Oh. Okay. Superintendent?
Already on the consent agenda.
Yep.
All right, I recommend approval of consent agenda items 8.01 to 10.02.
You've heard the superintendent's recommendation. We have a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Okay.
All right, and then 10.03 was pulled by Dr. Burns.
Yeah, I just, I was wondering, now that the governor has announced that we won't do FSA next year, do we still need this, I don't know where Dr. Weiskopf went. Oh, there she is. I don't know if we still need to have APM on the calendar, because wasn't APM, which is a progress monitoring thing, I thought it was literally being designed to sort of match up to the FSA.
Dr. Weiskopf, can you come up?
I can, but Amy's
Can-
probably better prepared to answer the question.
Okay. Can y'all come together?
Because like,
But this is this year's assessment calendar, not next year's.
That's
Right.
correct, and I'm
Right.
she was probably going to mention that we're still having FSA this year.
right, so my question though is, like, I think the APM assessment, I had heard it was optional, and on the thing, it doesn't like say optional, and it looks like it takes up a week of time. So is that what we'll be going to after FSA? And is that why it's still there? Or are we just still trying to see if why would we, if we're just correlating to see if that would be a good predictor of FSA, that doesn't seem like a good use of our time if FSA is gonna go away.
It is aligned to FSA standards and allows us the opportunity to provide instruction on any gaps that we would find in that. We do not have all of the information on how they are going to assess, but it does seem it's going to be the same format typing as APM, where there's 3 different implementations during the school year as we progress monitor along the way. So it's that same type of format. They're going to have to align it to the best standards of whatever they do choose to use. But this year, it is aligned to FSA, which our students will be taking at the end of the year.
So-
We've eliminated some other tests and put APM in its place. The LSAs that they were taking each quarter for ELA and math, if there's a equal APM assessment, they are not taking that. It's
Okay.
optional. for
Okay,
this teacher
so,
to decide.
okay, so we're switching. I didn't realize that the other ones had gone away. Okay, so they're not gonna take 2 sets of assessments, 2 sets of progress monitoring assessments.
They're optional, so a teacher can choose if they wanted to use the LSA quarterly assessment on there.
What does optional exactly mean? Like, is optional like you're being voluntold to do it?
Not
Or is it like per teacher, or is it per
teacher.
principal, per school?
I think teachers come together to collaborate around whether they need the data from that assessment, and then they would make the decision on whether it's useful for them. We would not expect them to be using it if it's not useful to their instruction at the end of the assessment.
Do we expect them to do both, the LSAs and the APM? If both are, I mean.
Both, like for ELA and math, because APM
Yeah.
only exists in ELA and math,
Yeah.
up through 8th grade math. No, it's optional. It's a teacher decision at that point.
Okay, okay. So that seems fine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But could you clarify the time frame? Because you said there was a week of testing, but
The
what I'm seeing.
APM, like, when I looked at APM specifically, it had like a week-long window.
Yeah, well, I think the window here is multiple weeks, but that's just you
window
just
of
give it in that 2-week period. It's not necessarily lasting 2 weeks to do that test.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
But I guess where I thought you were gonna go with this question is the benefits of APM over iReady in the elementary level. I know that K2, we don't necessarily have that, but I guess that's a case where we are double progress monitoring, right? At least in the upper grades of elementary, where the APM exists, and we're also doing the iReady testing.
Yes, we do have both of those assessments on our calendar.
Y'all know my love
yeah.
of iReady. I don't know, can we ditch that one? I mean, I guess when I look at the correlation and what we were presented previously with the data about how nicely the APM seems to predict FSA results, do we still need the iReady at the elementary level? I mean, I guess outside of K2, because you have to do something, but.
Well, we also need it for 3rd grade, remembering that we need that concordance score, possibly need that concordance score. And then we have the instruction that goes along with it to help us for remediation, because when they're not meeting it in iReady, there's a pathway that they can go through and provide instruction for part of their interventions. And APM doesn't do that. APM doesn't provide the intervention pathway for them. It just gives us the information on the
information, and then we'd be left to produce our own intervention. So I guess you couldn't use that data to then, I mean, if you're gonna say hypothetically that iReady is the intervention, then could you not just use the APM data to assign lessons manually to students? I don't know.
Maybe
I've
that would be
had-
that'd be a huge lift on the teachers to look at each student and their APM data and how the iReady. I'm not sure the system would work that way, but I hate to make a decision based on the system. But I think that would be a heavy lift on the teachers to assign those lessons based on that.
Do we think APM will be the test that they use instead of FSA? Is that why we're prepping them? I mean, we're prepping them we're like having them do extra stuff. So what's the purpose?
Well, the APM system gives us good information on what students have mastered towards the Florida standards now. If the state believes that's the system to use, then yes, they would be in it. But right now, our students that take computerized testing take it on that same system and that same platform using those same tools. So they are getting practice on a platform, so we know then the platform wouldn't be getting in their way when they take the assessment at the end of the year. Whether they make a total platform change and system, we don't know. We haven't been given that information from the state at all. We've just gotten the same information that you all have heard on the news, I'm certain.
How long does the APM test take to take? Because I did think that they were longer based on how it was written in the thing.
It varies per student, obviously. We looked at an average to be able to pick how long. 45 minutes to 1 period to 2 periods, 45 minutes to 90 minutes.
What I think is interesting on the timeline is, and I'm not sure if this is maybe a different format, but did we used to break down how all the minutes totaled to produce our final number?
Yes.
So I don't necessarily see that on. I mean, I guess you can do some math to try to figure it out. But what I think is interesting is that as I'm just looking down the sheet here, every grade level, we are assigning more district mandated testing than the state is. And so, I mean, if we've already got, I guess, this concern the state is over-testing kids, and then we as a district are.
Our percentage, you can have up to 5%. There's no
Right.
grade level near that.
Well, I know what you can have, but like, the 3rd grade, for instance, statewide assessments are 320 minutes, and district mandated is 860 minutes. I don't know, it seems like a lot of district testing.
Remember, assessment is part of instruction. We have to have that information from assessments in order to drive our instruction.
Right, but the teachers get assessments constantly. This really is just for you guys at the district level. I mean,
I
how
don't
many systems does a teacher need if they have iReady, and they have Lake assessments, and now they have API? How many tests that are of a standardized nature does a kid have to take if they're also just taking a regular math test, you know? Like, isn't the learning math and then taking the math test the more formative and productive method of evaluating?
I think these standardized assessments also, like, that would help you with what was just taught. They're also helping us towards that end goal in retaining it. Can they now apply it in a different situation to be able to master it at the end of the year as well? Because remember, they do have to take that assessment at the end of the year.
I guess I'm still just struggling at the amount of district mandated testing we're applying versus what's required from the state.
You're saying required, but I heard you say that the APM and the Lake benchmark assessments are those interchangeable, optional? Are those both required?
APM is required this year. We
Lake
removed
benchmark
the,
assessment is optional.
yes, in the areas where an APM assessment exists.
K-8, or not, I mean, 3, where they're at.
3 through 8 in math and 3 through 10 in ELA.
So where you're saying mandatory, that's where I'm listening, I promise. I'm like trying to think about what you guys are saying, because I see the side of both of them, to be honest with you. So is that an actual number of mandatory, or is that if you were to choose to do both of those assessments?
I guess that's a good question. That's just the number that I'm reading here off the chart of what the number of minutes for district assessments is.
Right.
So,
The numbers that you've been given on here are the mandatory ones per the district.
so 860 mandatory minutes of testing for third graders.
For math and reading.
And the state's requiring 320.
For math and reading combined.
Yes,
320 is math and reading combined for the state.
yes.
A lot of testing.
Yeah.
I think it is a lot of testing, but I think we have to keep in mind the reason we test. As a teacher, and I'm sure you're very aware of this, Mr. Dodd, but when you get the results back, if you have a class of 20 kids, you need to look at where they are. There may be some kids in the room that are in need of a different method or a different practice or a different technique. If you don't test them, the teacher won't know that, so they won't know where to go next. As a parent or a grandparent, if you want to see whether your child is on target to be able to successfully pass FSA at the end or whatever the monitoring system turns out to be, I would much rather test them and know how they're moving along throughout the year than give them less tests and get to the end of the year and wonder why a great number of our, especially third grade. Third grade is very difficult. The platform of the test is new to them. Being able to have code reads that you've never seen before, where there's vocabulary and comprehension. I mean, it's very extensive what we ask third graders to do. And coming from second grade, that's extremely different. To be able to read the directions of a test, where it may say, find an example of 2 things, or which one doesn't have the answer there. Third graders tend to just skip right over that. But if they've had lots of practice prior to the real assessment, then they're more inclined to do better, I think.
I would agree, test prep works. I just don't know that it's very, I don't know that the educational value is what we want, right? Like, because you're describing how to teach a kid to take a test better.
No, I'm describing how to teach the standards that the state has set forth and how to guarantee that the teacher has some idea how well her instruction has been for an individual student in her class.
And I think that's the key, that obviously you want an assessment to be able to inform your instruction and be able to pull some information from that helps you formulate that. I guess I'm just wondering is, do you need 860 minutes of additional testing to do that? It almost seems like we're maybe duplicating efforts in some places, and this is just what's mandated from the district. So me as a teacher, I'm still giving my own test at the end of every unit, and a quiz is at potentially the end of every lesson, plus all the kids' work that they've produced over the course of 180 days. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, as a teacher, I knew where my kids were, and it's not because the district mandated a whole bunch of testing. But, I also speak from the day back when we had a mandatory week at the end of every quarter to test kindergartners. But I mean, when you figure out 860 minutes just divided by math and reading, so that's 430 minutes. So that's like 7 class periods for each subject per year that we're just doing district testing, plus the state. So now you've lost a couple of weeks of instruction just testing, not even counting the tests that I'm giving as a teacher. I just don't know. I wonder if we're duplicating in some places that there's not more to pull back.
I would tell you that I feel like it's important to even consider that sometimes in the classroom, the tests and the assessments that we're using, we think that we're doing the right thing. And then when we take an iReady test, I didn't use iReady in my classroom, but we took a different test in the classroom. I'm gonna really show that it's been a while. I can't even remember what test it was. When I got those results, sometimes they didn't match the results of what my grades showed. And so it was important to look through that lens as well and say, okay, where is this saying that my kids are showing a deficit versus where are my grades showing that my students are having a deficit? And so I think that's really important that we remember, and we've had this discussion before, that one assessment doesn't show what a student knows and can do, which is why we all have such a huge concern with FSA in the first place, determining whether a third grader is retained or not. So I do think that having multiple lenses to look at a child through is important and to communicate with. I think 820 minutes sounds excessively higher than the state. I'm not sure why. I would be interested in seeing what that consists of, but I don't think that you leave it just up to a classroom or a group of classroom assessments, because again, if I'm doing my own thing and you're doing something different and you're doing something different and we're never correlating that and saying, what are my kids doing that looks similar to yours, then how do I know that what I'm doing is the right thing? And so I think it's important to look at the standardized way of what are my fourth graders doing at this school versus what are my fourth graders doing in Lake County versus what are my fourth graders doing across the state of Florida. That is important. That is important to me as a teacher, to see how my kids are serving up in their local community and across the state of Florida. So I think there's some value in all 3 levels of testing, to be honest with you, and where are my kids fitting in that, and what do my assessments look like? And maybe it's just because my assessments aren't aligned, or maybe maybe I need to do better in this area. And I say that because for me, it was English language arts. So I was a math person, right? So I always struggled in the ELA area, but I would go next door and say to Mrs. Hartog, actually, what are you doing to teach this? Because you're killing me. Like, your scores are amazing and my kids are like struggling. And so she would actually come sit with me and we would work together. And I think you guys have heard that story before, but that's how we work together and collaborate to move my kids forward, right? So,
Which I think makes a lot of sense, right?
Right.
And which is why we had the LSAs, right?
Right.
Or so like, why do we have both? That's my question, is
Why do
why LSA and the IPM? Like, why not just switch?
We did.
Well, I think we did, and so that's the problem.
But you're
So
still saying the
LSAs are not
LSAs
even
are
in this total.
still, but no, she just said the LSAs are
If there's an
What is in
APM,
that
it's not in the
well,
total.
optional, right?
If the teacher wants to give the LSA, they can. That's totally up to them. That would be just for their own information, or that for their collaborative planning if their team chose to look at it that way. But we're not collecting any LSA data.
Oh, okay.
So what does that 820 minutes consist
Yeah.
of?
So I think that it's important in 3rd grade to understand that 100 of those minutes come from the 3rd assessment on reading that we don't give to our 4th and 5th graders. But we do give it to our 3rd graders as a precautionary in case they are not successful in the
Right,
FSA. So
okay.
there's 100 minutes there. 160 of district, so there's 200 for math, there's 300 for iReady reading, 200 iReady math, 300 iReady reading. That additional 100's that 3rd assessment. 180 for the APM for math, totals for the year, and 180 for the APM for reading. We figured the highest possible minutes, not the lowest. So this
Does
is,
that include all the iReady just daily practice, or no?
no, this is just the diagnostics.
So when you say required, and that's like if a student takes 40 minutes and not 90.
It's actually
what you
the
mean by-
upper end. We use the upper
That's what I'm
end
saying.
number.
So you went
yes.
to the amount of testing minutes that you can have for each assessment.
They're untimed, so we tried to look at what a typical student takes and then use the student that is going to take a little bit longer to figure our minutes to make sure we were within the percentage that is allowable. So it is probably on the higher end of the estimates, and then 100 of those minutes are additional for third grade because of that third assessment of iReady reading that we do not give in fourth and fifth grade. We give it in K1 and 2. It's part of the student performance measures for evaluation. And third grade is the first, we give them more time as well because it's the first time that they are taking
I
the
have a third
assessment. of
grader.
this
I appreciate that. I'm just gonna tell you guys, all I'm picturing is Jace while we're having this conversation, and it is, we don't stress that. We're not, again, it's one test and it's one day, but like the maturity level of an 8-year-old from it's just incredible to think about him in a testing environment that's so high stakes.
So at second grade, the state doesn't require any testing for a second grader. The district requires 600 minutes. So all 10 of those hours, that's all iReady, reading and math.
Yes, we give it that third time.
That's for teacher evaluation purposes too, right? We
Yes.
have to have that data.
Having kids test for 10 hours so we can evaluate a teacher.
We've
Let
been
that
doing
comment
that.
just
Well,
sink
not
in.
just that, we also are using that information to
Right,
drive our
right.
instruction.
Sure, right.
Pull our small
Assuming-
groups and,
Assuming it's valid though, because, okay, so the other piece that we've seen, I think, time and time again, is that the iReady data is just, sometimes it's reliable and most times it seems to not be, right? I mean, we've seen how that has been all over the place. But there's no APM at that point for second grade. But it looks like what we saw at the other grade levels, the APM was far more of a correlation. It makes me wonder why we're still doing iReady. I don't know.
I'm looking for topics to do my dissertation on, Mr. Dodd, if you want me to look into that. We can't fix this. This is a big problem. I mean,
It's huge.
It's a huge problem when you think about the amount of time, but.
But y'all want to just, you want to keep with it? I mean, like, teachers will freak out without iReady. They use it to teach and to.
And you know, I almost
agree.
feel
To
like
evaluate a
Especially
lot.
their intensive instruction.
but you know, I guess you also have to recognize that sometimes the iReady data doesn't come back very reliable. You know, what we've seen looking here at board level, when we've gotten iReady data back and we say, oh, look, this whole group looked great, and not a single one of them passed the FSA, or vice versa. Hey, look, iReady said you were doing amazing. Everybody was going to get 4s and 5s, and then you know, the data just sometimes
Substantiates the reason to take multiple.
Exactly.
or use one that's reliable. You know,
Is there one that's reliable?
the
from year
APM
to-
was amazing.
This
right?
year?
When we looked at it this year.
I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Right?
Like, there was one year, didn't we correlate iReady one year, and it was like super correlated, and then, right?
That was
Do
one
we
and only
remember?
one time.
Right. That's my
Once.
point. I just don't, I know that our targets move too. Like, it seems like the more we adjust to scoring better on our FSA and our FCAT assessments in the past, the target gets moved as well. Like, they're looking for the proficiency to continue to push up as well.
I certainly think with the move to a progress monitoring system, you will see all these companies wanting, you know, they're all going to be looking
They
to
are.
find the
I agree.
the next greatest thing aligned to the standards. And so you've got new standards, now you've got a new assessment coming, then you've got a new accountability system coming. And so I think us trying to figure out what's a more reliable system probably is not the best use of our time this year, because we know it's all going to change at the end of this year anyways. And so our teachers wanted iReady in K2. They found it to be, even if it's not highly correlated, they do know the needs of their kids, and it does help them in intervention time to be able to pull some small groups. And it was the only tool we had in terms of the evaluation, because I know the district had looked at multiple options, and that was the one that teachers overwhelmingly wanted. It was one that they knew and had used as a way to help guide their instruction, and so we stayed with it. So I don't know if the state will come up with anything different for K2 as they look at the progress monitoring system. I was in a meeting last week, and I volunteered to serve on that committee and told everyone I would love to be a part of that and the development of that at the state level. I think it's a great opportunity to give some input, and we have seen great correlation with APM. I know that is one that our teachers have been more fond of because it has been so highly correlated. So I think there's just a lot of work ahead of us, and hoping that we can kind of help be part of crafting that for the state.
That sounds considerably more optimistic than some of our discussion tonight. So that's good. I guess my other question surrounding iReady is just obviously it's only as reliable as the data that maybe a kid's effort they put into it, or as reliable as iReady decides to make it. But So I guess my question is, okay, so at the K2 level, kids are gonna spend 10 hours of the course of the year doing iReady assessments and screens, you know, some kids just don't really put the effort into those, and so if a kid rushes through that, my understanding is that iReady will actually flag the assessment for that level of reliability. Do the teachers get that report, or is that just housed with you all at curriculum?
They can see that on their reports as well, yes. And we have done considerable work with the schools on making sure that we have guidelines for success, and that's one of the things that we've addressed, are those rushing flags, and they've gone down considerably in our district.
So when a rushing flag does appear, does the parent get notified with those sorts of results, or does the teacher just withhold that? Typically, what's the practice for that?
That I don't know. I do know that there are times when a teacher indicates that they believe a student could do much better. We reset that test and allow them to reassess. So I think that at that point, it's done on an individual basis. I don't know if the parent is notified of a rushing or not.
I guess I'd like to see that put into practice because I think schools are just making decisions based on some of that data that they get out, and I know that K2 kids don't always take their time, they rush through it, triggers that rushing flag, and then teachers are running with that data, putting kids into MTSS throughout the district based on that information, which may or may not even be accurate, so.
We can add that to our guidelines for success.
That'd be great.
I have a question. Is iReady still one of the instruments used in the RTI progress monitoring process?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
It's the instrument, right, for the
Yeah.
most part?
So if we took that away, we'd have to find something else to replace it, because that has to be in place.
important.
Yes. And I think, yes.
We've had that discussion before. Any more discussion? Superintendent, you have a recommendation?
Yes, I recommend approval of 10.03, the 21-22 uniform statewide assessment calendar. I'll get it out in a minute.
You've heard the
moved.
superintendent's recommendation. You have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Okay, discussion? Final approval, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, sir. We have tonight the final approval of several policies. For the purposes of handling it practically, I've divided them into two groups. The first group will be as follows. Under Section 1000, Administration, 1122, Non-Discrimination and Equality Employment Opportunity, Section 1122.01, Prohibition Against Disability Discrimination in Employment, Section 1362, Anti-Harassment. Under subsection 2000, Section 2410, School Health Services, Section 2431, Interscholastic Athletics, Section 2431.05, Athletic Injuries Prevention and Treatment Program. In subsection 3000, Section 3122, Non-Discrimination and Equal Employment Opportunity, Section 3122.01, Prohibition Against Disability Discrimination in Employment, and Section 3362, Anti-Harassment. If there is anyone here this evening that wishes to speak to the final approval of any of the amendments to these policies as listed, please come forward to the podium at this time. Chairman, I don't see anyone coming forward and believe it appropriate to close the public hearing.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve those changes to these policies?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? 5-0.
The second group of policies begin with subsection 4000, support staff. Section 4122, non-discrimination and equal employment opportunity. Section 4122.01, prohibition against disability discrimination in employment. Section 4362, anti-harassment. Section 5122, under subsection 5000, entrance requirements. Section 5611, due process rights. Section 6107, authorization to accept and distribute electronic records to use electronic signature and make electronic fund transfers. Section 6114, cost principles. Section 6325, procurement, federal grants, funds. Section 6330, acquisition of professional architectural, engineering, landscape architecture, or land surveying services. Next subsection 7000, property. Section 7450, property inventory, and section 7455, accounting system for capital assets. I did not read and was pulled from the list that was provided tonight, and in the board docs was sections 5780, which will come back at a later time. If there's anyone here this evening that wishes to speak to the amendments to any of the policies that were just listed, please come forward to the podium at this time. Mr. Chairman, I don't see anyone coming forward and believe it appropriate to close the public hearing.
You've heard Mr. Johnson. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Okay,
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
that was enough.
That was a lot.
Okay, Superintendent?
There were 2 letters of condolence sent since our last meeting. One sent to the family of Sandra Allen and Earl Jack Tolliver, mother and grandfather of Cindy Patterson, and our administrative coordinator in our ESC department. And also to Joseph Bartolomeo. He's a route manager in transportation. He lost his father, Joseph. And so our condolences to those families. I did just want to mention tonight, you saw in the newspaper last week, there was a newspaper article that followed a K-12 Education Appropriations Committee meeting that was held last week as well in Tallahassee. The article was about the school districts not spending their ESSER funds. I'm not sure if any of you saw that. It's come up a couple of times, and I think it's been confusing to the public who hear that we have all this ESSER money and that it's not being spent. And so I just wanted to, just a point of clarification and kind of give the board an update on where we are with that. So currently, the ESSER funds, which was the first group that we received to start school with last year, all of that has been spent. And we're finishing up, closing out some of those, the final expenditure reports that have to be submitted to the state now. So all of those are done. The ESSER 2 money is the one that I think is probably causes the most confusion. The ESSER dollars, when they were rolled out, when they came to the Florida Department of Education, they broke them down into 4 specific categories. 3 of them were very restrictive, and one of them was the lump sum portion that was a larger portion of dollars. The district had to submit a separate application for every one of those pots, so 4 different applications for the 4 pots of money. It had to go through a legislative review, and we received on September 10th, the 14th, and the 16th approval for 3 of the 4. So while last week, when it was being said no one had spent their money, we didn't get approval to spend the dollars until September 10th for one of the categories, the 14th for one and the 16th for the other. And we still have not received any approval to spend the lump sum portion, which was the larger portion of those dollars. So while we've submitted a plan, it's going through the approval process. I do think that we'll hear it about it soon. When you're hearing that our monies haven't been spent, just know we haven't had the money to spend, although we have covered any initial costs using general fund monies, and we'll be reimbursing the general fund with those monies once they're approved. And then in regards to ESSER 3, which is still to come, we've not received any information about ESSER 3. We do not know how much we're going to get. We can only guess based on how they allocated the other 2 pots of money. We don't have a timeline. We don't have an application or template for submission of that. And as soon as we do, the ARP Act requires the district to engage stakeholders and a committee to bring them together. That is a large sum of money. We assume it's going to be about $80 million. $10 million of that going to charter schools. The remaining dollars, we will be looking to form a stakeholder group of all different stakeholders who would like to participate in this process to help us to determine the best use of those dollars and submit our plan to the DOE once we know more. kind of waiting to get all the information before we form that committee, but if anyone knows anyone that's interested in serving, please let me know. And I've already talked to Ms. Smith about getting some teachers involved, and I'll get with Ms. Cronin about some support staff, and I have my student advisory committee already coming up with ideas, so we'll have lots of input on how we're going to utilize that money in the best interests of all of our kids and our teachers and staff when the time comes to do so. Do y'all have any questions about the monies? I just wanted to make sure that everyone was clear and say it publicly that the monies that haven't been spent because we don't have the money, so.
Everybody good? Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you for clarifying, Superintendent. Okay, board member comments. We'll start with Mr. Dodd.
Sure. So I'm wondering if maybe this board or maybe the chairman on our behalf might be able to send a letter to the State Department of Education and maybe copy the governor to express our displeasure or dissatisfaction with the delivery of textbooks this year from the State Depository. I know that a number of books have just been recently arriving. We still have books missing for core classes. We're 8 weeks out into the 9-week grading period now. Going back to the Florida statute, it's the district school board's responsibility to provide adequate instructional materials for all students. And I don't know how we can do that if the state doesn't help us out. So, I don't know if I'm willing to drive the U-Haul to go pick them up. I don't know. But, it's just completely unacceptable in my mind to think about teachers without resources, to have kids without books 8 weeks into the school year.
Totally agree. So you're asking for a letter?
Yeah.
I'm on board with
Send
that.
one?
Yes, I'm
Everybody? Okay. Can we write a letter?
We can certainly write a letter.
Natalie?
I did reach out to the head of the Florida School Book, I cannot talk tonight, Florida School Book Depository, say that 5 times fast. They, like everyone else across the country, have experienced some shortages, and so I know that they are trying to get them. I will certainly follow up before I submit any letter, just to see where we are with anything that's left.
That'd be
I was
good.
told that by last Friday, we will have received everything except Spanish 1. So if that hasn't happened, then I need to find out why that didn't happen. I even offered to send some trucks up there to pick them up in Jacksonville. So I will follow up. I had not heard that we did not receive everything that I was told we were going to receive, but I'm. Okay. We still have a few that are supposed to be. Okay. Can you let me know what we're still missing so that I can reach out and find out where they are? And
So maybe we
seriously,
wait on the letter.
if-
I agree with the superintendent.
if we need to
I
go
still
up.
want to express my displeasure. On behalf of all these kids sitting there without a textbook.
Right.
Do they
Yeah.
have the online option available of those textbooks?
They do, yes. They have the online option. It's just the actual books themselves. And we were told there was paper shortages across the country. There were all these delays within the companies. And then one of the first shipments, remember the truck caught on fire on the interstate somewhere. And so that was, we've had some issues getting the books to us, none of which are certainly our fault. I hate to think that it's all the school book depository's fault, so I'd like to find out more, but if you could let me know tomorrow, I will absolutely call, and I will let you know where we go from there, and if we need to submit a letter, I will absolutely write a letter.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
I could also tweet the governor if that helps. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Mrs. Cunningham?
I don't have anything except reminder that Tavares High School is having homecoming this week. They're having a parade, and they're very excited. So we invite anyone who wishes to attend those activities, please do so. I don't have anything else.
Thank you. Dr. Burns?
I have, well, I think everyone knows, as Kim brought up, Ms. Conan, that we have a new Surgeon General, Dr. Ladapo. He's, well, I just wanted to bring up, there's this thing called the Great Barrington Declaration, and all y'all should go online and, seriously Google it. So it came out, right after the pandemic, there was a couple of scientists who released the Great Barrington Declaration. Apparently Great Barrington's in Massachusetts, but I think they just thought the name was fun because it is. And so that is it's a declaration that basically says, and y'all can read it, it's not long, that we need to basically use the young to protect the old by exposing the young children to COVID, so that will then protect the older people. I could say the scientific community is obviously in disagreement with this philosophy, but that's where all these people are coming from. I was really trying to figure out how we were finding, as I put it, the fifth doctor, 4 out of 5 doctors say this, and we kept coming up with all these 5s. And so he's one of them. So he signed on to the Great Barrington Declaration. I'm not like this is his philosophy. And so therefore we won't have quarantines anymore. Obviously we have no masks and or any other things. We're just going to basically pretend that COVID isn't real and all move on. So given that, I've asked the superintendent to at least treat this like lice or strep at a preschool, and give, if there's a child in the classroom that's been identified with COVID, because the children around that child do not need to quarantine, the quarantine space then becomes much bigger, because you have sick kid, quarantined kid who decides to stay here, might be getting sick, and then you have another child here who's sitting next to this one, potentially getting sick the whole time. And so I've just simply asked that we send out notices to the classroom instead. And so I know you've been working on that, yes?
So just a little bit about the conversation since she brought it up. I reached out to the principals because when she brought this to my attention, I said, well, let me talk to the principals. I'd like to, and Dr. Feltner and our regional directors also, we engaged in some conversation. The feedback from the principals was a couple of things. You take the one positive student, you're going to have to then go back and find the other 150 kids of every class that child has been in over 7 periods or 6 periods. And so having to, whether it's a call out, going into every schedule, identifying the kids that are assigned to that class, that would be very difficult in a middle and high school in particular to do that. That's a lot of phone calls, that's a lot of letters, and they had great concern about notifying parents who were outside of the 6-foot range simply because they felt like it might be an opportunity. More kids might say, hey, I could have been exposed, so I'm not going to come to school now. So they were afraid that it might be taken advantage of, that might cause some undue concern amongst parents, not understanding that maybe their child was a close exposure, because all of those individuals are still getting that personal phone call from those school leaders saying your child has been exposed. It's up to you whether you want to quarantine them or not, but you need to monitor their symptoms. So that's all still happening. So what she's asking is beyond that 6-foot radius, which is what the CDC guidelines say, anyone who's been within that classroom space with that child to be notified. So I shared that the middle and high school was very problematic for schools and just how to do that. It would be very problematic. So in an elementary school where you have a contained setting, it might be a little bit easier to send home a letter or to do a call out. But the elementary principals were concerned as well. Again, feeling as though that it was going to be a lot, not necessarily a lot of work to be able to do a call out, but as a parent, would it be more problematic for if I was on the other side of the room from this child, how would I know how far I was from that child? And am I causing some undue stress on parents by telling them that their child you were in a direct exposure, but you were in the room with somebody who tested positive? That has not been our practice. I serve at the will of the board, and if the board wants me to look further into the elementary, I told you that I was going to talk more to elementary, so I still need to go back and have more conversation. This was just, I think, Friday, and today's or Thursday. So I do need to have more conversation with them to see what that looks like. But I would like to know the thoughts of the board and whether or not we want to send out the notification to all those in a classroom or not. It's because we can certainly do that if that's what you want to do.
I'm sorry, was that Barrington with a B?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, I can definitely say parents want this. I did ask multiple parents, and I'm getting a lot of, they want that in large part because now that there's no protections in the schools, there's it's completely up to them to to decide whether or not it's safe for their children to be at school based on their family circumstances. So you have a lot of people with maybe a father or a mother who has some comorbidity or condition that then they're concerned that the child will bring it home to the family. And so they want to know, like they feel they need to know when somebody in their child's class is sick. And I can see if we can't manage high school, I mean, I could think of a way that it would work. We've done strep notices, haven't we? Like, I know we did lice notices, because I had a million of them when I was a kid. I mean, it may have been when I was a kid,
I
but
was gonna say, I have never, and listen, Jensen's 15, so I haven't had a kid in school for a long time, but I have never gotten a notice that somebody in Jensen's class had lice.
No,
well,
as-
it's pretty common. It's done in, well, it's definitely done when my son was in California. It's like standard. And I know that we did it years ago because I was a kid who just got lice because I had long hair. And so, like, as many times as mom would treat me, it would be over and over again. So I know it's very simple procedure to do.
We're still notifying all of the students that were in direct exposure, the 6-foot radius.
Within a 6-foot radius,
That's
right?
right. And so those people can make the educated decision on whether or not they quarantine based on their symptoms. But I guess my question is, so even during the height of this pandemic, when Florida had 5 times as many cases as it does now, we weren't notifying a parent of a kid who's across the room, right? So I guess I'm wondering.
Well, we were quarantining kids
No,
in
no.
the room, though.
But
just that they
no,
were in
no,
direct exposure.
a year ago, that when we had mask mandates and then we had quarantines, we weren't notifying the entire classroom.
That somebody in your class tested positive for COVID. We're just,
Right, because that child and then somebody within 6 feet of them, anybody within 6 feet, would be told to stay home.
so then do you
that they're
expand that
sick.
to the cafeteria?
I don't think you need to. I think that we can be rational and just keep it in the classroom. I don't think it
So,
has
but-
to be expanded to the
But
cafeteria.
But you don't know where
using the
you
same-
get COVID.
But I'm
Well, no, you do. I mean, that's what contact tracing does, and that's why we're not
But
doing
I'm
it.
just trying to follow the same logic. So if I'm sitting in a class and somebody's sitting across the room from me, 30 feet, then, so we're notifying everybody in that 30-foot radius. So in the cafeteria, I might have Mrs. Smith's class behind me within 6 feet or 12 feet or however. So, I mean, now do we have to expand that radius to say, okay, now we're looking at the 30-foot radius of the cafeteria and suddenly we're notifying 4 classes that, hey, somebody sitting at a table within the same distance that a classroom distance would be has COVID.
Well,
I
given
think it
that
might-
lunch is like 20 minutes, I don't.
30,
Okay.
yeah.
But like, I mean, we could make it as complicated as you want, but we could make it
I'm not
quite
trying to make it
simple.
complicated. But then the other question for me though is, okay, so if we decide that it's so important to do for this set of students, then what would be the logic for not doing it for all students? And in which case, then when you talk about a middle or high school situation, you're now talking, if you've got, let's say, 5 cases of COVID in your school a day, maybe less, you're notifying 500 parents. So you're basically going back to doing the call-out to the whole school at that point, that somebody in your school has tested positive, and I think that our dashboard provided those benefits already of getting more up-to-date information, and I'm looking at the reactions that I've seen from parents, they've been thankful that those call-outs have stopped, because people were they just stopped listening.
That's actually what I've heard, is they're happy that we're not.
So I mean, I think as long as you're providing still the notification directly to those that were exposed and allowing them to make their educated decision, I don't know why at this point, you would start adding more notification.
Do you understand the logic of it? My logic?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
Okay, so if I have a child here who's sick, right? This child and this child and this child and this child would have been sent home, right?
Well, they're all gonna be notified still, right?
They'll all be notified, right? So let's pretend they're notified and this one is here and he caught it from this one, okay? Now another child is sitting here and here and here, all for 5 days, 4 days, getting sick from this kid. So we have to, this parent doesn't know. This
Assuming-
parent doesn't know that this one was sick, only this parent.
So what is the transmission rate for our quarantine students to have actually contracted?
You would have to ask the Florida Department of Health, they don't tell us those
So
things.
I did ask that question, because I wanted to know if we were overreaching on our quarantines, and they don't track that information. They don't know what the transmission rate is, other than it was significantly improving is what I was told. And so, I mean, when we were quarantining 4,000 kids a week, which,
I'm not asking, I'm simply saying we notify this
Well,
parent.
I'm just-
These parents want to know
I don't know
that
that
their
they want to know.
kids were, I do.
I feel
How
comfortable going
many,
to check
how
the
many
dashboard.
parents need to know? But the dashboard doesn't tell you if your kid has been exposed in your class. You get that?
I do.
And you're like, A-okay? Like, you're like, yay, no
So
notification?
we've been into this, I guess, about a year and a half, and parents have
Right.
now an unprecedented level, the highest level of access of data that we've ever provided.
No, they don't. They have much less data right now than they did 6 months ago.
From
The
the school
Florida
district?
Department of Health is taking away a ton of information.
From this school district, they have much more information than we've ever provided.
No, they don't. They have the same amount of information provided in a dashboard. It's the same amount of information, but go ahead. What's your point? Like, I don't understand why wouldn't you want to know? Why would, like, these parents are telling me they want to know,
And I also.
and
have
you
parents-
don't want to know.
But Dr. Burns, if you went to the dashboard and you saw your school, could you not contact the school? If you really
Every
wanted to know?
day to know if your kid.
You're watching the dashboard. We have cases, they're dropping, our
I
infection rate's
know.
dropping like a rock.
Yeah, it's great.
So if you go and you look on a site, and the school that my child goes to, there's X number, and I haven't been called, but I still want to know, couldn't you call? Because if your child was sitting close to that child, they have been called. But if I just want to generally know, because I see the cases, I can call the school, right? And see what
Well,
class.
you can always call the school, yeah.
Right, I mean, so.
And I will
Seems like
tell
we're
you,
handling it.
And the hardest part for me in this, having had kids that have been quarantined for the last year and a half, my kids have been quarantined probably 10 times, and I'm not exaggerating, between repeat quarantines. They have not gotten it. They have not gotten sick. So thankfully, I mean, I am thankful for that. And I have two things. I get teased a lot, just so you guys know, because I always say two things, and it's like 15 more. But I wonder about the principal, like Mrs. Cornegie explained, that sitting with him and listening to the process of having to document and find out who sat by who, and then find out, like, the next stretch. I had principals telling me, like, I'm going crazy. Like, I do nothing but sit in my office and try to figure out who sat by who to tell people, and that was within the 6-foot radius. So if we have to expand beyond the 6-foot radius, I don't know how we manage that. I really don't. And this is not just principals, it's their entire staff that's working to track
So-
that. Hold on, let me finish my
Yeah, go
second thought,
ahead.
and then I'll be quiet, because there's like 15 more that have just come up. My last thought is, like, 2 weeks ago, I took my daughters to Halloween Horror Nights. And then technically under this, like, thought process that we could have been exposed, because I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say that we probably were exposed. I mean, like, we were in very close quarters with complete strangers. So would you not want to know that we went there? And you probably wouldn't want to come over. Like, you wouldn't want to sit by my daughters after that. Like, they were probably, Jensen has, I told you that, she has double ear infection, sinus infection. Probably we picked it up there. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. But I don't know how you limit telling people that you are potentially being exposed to COVID in the world today. It is there. It's everywhere. It's anywhere you go.
I hear you. I think the difference is that these parents that are reaching out to me are telling me that they feel they need to protect their families. And, gosh, even if you read the Great Barrington Declaration, which I just love the name, you know, we have to protect, in theory, they think that they can protect the vulnerable. And we need to do something to protect these parents and people that are really trying to, like, I have no problem that you went to Halloween Horror Nights, right? But if Jensen's in a class with my kid and does have COVID, I would want to know. That's all. Like, it doesn't have to be I would just like a note so that I can watch that child and potentially
But you would know if your kid was
quarantine.
by Jensen. You would know she had it.
I wouldn't know you went to Halloween Horror Nights.
No, but if she got COVID, you would know that she got COVID, because you would get that phone call that you have a child in the class.
Only
that
if
has
in
COVID.
6 feet, though.
Right.
So if you're sitting across the room, and you get this notification as a parent that, hey, your kid was sitting across the room from Miss Luke's daughter who just tested
Went to Halloween
positive,
Horror Nights.
or went to, whatever it is, then what
she
are you
could've
gonna do as
gone
a
to
parent? Are you
Publix,
gonna start
for goodness
quarantining your
sakes.
child because they sat across the room?
Wait, what?
Are you gonna, so if you get the notification as a parent that your
Okay, so
kid
this is this is a contagious disease, like.
Okay, right, and I'm asking a question because I genuinely want to know the answer to this. I don't know how this is, what these parents are looking for that'd be different here. So if kid's sitting here on this side of the room and somebody else tests positive all the way on the other side of the room, okay, now I'm going to get the call that says, hey, your kid was in a class with somebody else who tested positive for COVID. Now what am I going to do? Am I going to quarantine my kid who wasn't even in direct exposure?
Well, you can at least know that your child is exposed, and then if you need to.
Aren't we checking for symptoms all the time of our children? I mean, if my kid starts showing symptoms, I'm gonna address that regardless.
So this is a really standard thing to send home, like notifications of any infectious disease. Like I'm sure, is Chris Landry here? No, I'm sure it's very common. So it doesn't have to be, this is a notice of quarantine. It can just be a notice of exposure.
Right, but
It's
I'm just
nice
confused
to,
as
like
to
in
what the
many
action is
places,
at
you
that point.
know if your kid was exposed to strep. Why? So you can take them to the doctor
But
and
we don't
ask
send
the
out those
doctor for a
notices.
strep test. Right, but this is COVID and we're dealing with a pandemic. So why wouldn't we go like the one extra like tiny step to like help other parents make good choices for their families?
But if my kid is sitting across the room, why would I
Because,
quarantine that kid?
because the Delta spreads much further. There is, I mean, I didn't bring it, but there's one great CDC picture of a teacher that was unmasked who exposed kids all the way into the back of the room, and about 12 kids were exposed in a class of 24. So the exposure is, and children in elementary rooms move around.
But also, Dr. Burns, because Dr. Currios told me a year ago that that COVID-19 actually stays airborne longer. Hence, we took all those precautions with our air conditioning all during the summer. So we've addressed the air quality issue in the classroom. So I don't know the classroom that you're speaking about, but if it was at turning the air 2.5 times, then that's possible. We're turning air almost 4 times now in the classroom. So I just don't see the benefit of if the CDC, let's assume Dr. Currios told me 12 feet was the magic number. So let's assume that in this room that you are further than 12 feet. So now that, are we going to call her to tell her that I'm infected?
I
That's
think
what
if
you're asking?
Yeah, because children move around in an elementary school classroom. They're constantly working in groups and then going back, and then working in groups and then going back, and we want that. And that's a good thing,
Okay.
but, will of the board.
Well, I told you last week when you brought it up to me Thursday, give me a little bit more time. Let me have some conversation. We talked about this being an elementary school thing. I explained that it's very problematic in middle and high, and you said,
Well, there's a lot, the time that kids are, but at least in high school, they're not together all day, 8 hours, So maybe there's some logic to that. And most of the parents that I've been talking to do have kids in elementary.
What I do know is, because my son just went to Halloween Horror Nights and is a medical student, and he wore his N95 and his girlfriend did. And so it's up to individuals to take precautions. And I think that kids are going to, no one has said with the Surgeon General or any conversation this board has ever had was that we don't support the wearing a mask if it is the parent's choice or the child's choice. Because we saw, I know last year during the pandemic, we had some parents that said their kids weren't going to wear a mask. And I know of 2 cases where the kid went on campus and put his mask on and said, that's my parents' deal, not mine. So I think that I don't want to give the impression that we've ever said, don't wear a mask. Because I think as a collective that we've said that worn properly and age appropriate and parents' choice is the idea. The Surgeon General, thank God, took action to reduce the quarantine because we're sending healthy kids home 10 times the infectious rate. And so now then, we have a reasonable that says we're going to watch the child. If you show no symptoms, then you're good to go. But it's also the parents' responsibility, and we have school nurses, to say if these kids start showing symptoms, they need to leave. So I think
Can
I think we're in a good place.
Can I interject? This was interesting to me too. So I've actually, this is Jensen's third COVID test, because it's been going, she's been sick for about a week now. And so today, when we got her negative results back from Advent Health, she said she tested negative for the coronavirus. So technically, she can go back to school. With a sinus infection, with ear infections, she still coughs and sneezes. And I'm thinking, why would you tell anybody to send, do you know what I'm, like, no, she cannot go back to school right now. She would be coughing all over everybody around her. So it was interesting to me even that we're talking about sending sick kids back to school because they don't have COVID. Like, when did it become okay to go to school sick just because you don't have coronavirus? Because I feel like we are so super scared to skip school unless we have COVID, because we're missing so much school because of COVID quarantine. Even Jensen, the reason that she wanted to go get tested again today was because she said, Mom, I am worried about missing so much school and not having COVID. Can we please go get tested? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And I emailed all of her teachers today, and we went and got tested. But there's this stigma that if you don't have COVID, even if you don't feel well, you should go to school, because that's the only reason you shouldn't be in school. And that scares me too. Like, there's another precedent that's happening, and people shouldn't be going to school if their kids are sick with viruses of any kind, like we're suggesting here. But that, like, just to flip the coin, I feel like we become hyper sensitively aware of COVID, only COVID, and we're dismissing. She said, that physician that I saw today said several people have been in here sick with other things than COVID. It's just something else is happening going in or through the community right now. But how many of those kids are at school right now because it's not coronavirus, and we don't want to miss school unless we're quarantined or have COVID? And that scares me too. There's a lot of things that are going on attendance wise.
Well, 3 years ago, influenza would wipe out entire classrooms.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Jason's
But we never
kindergarten
spoke about
class.
that.
No, we did not. And when you were speaking about notifications, he had half his class out for the flu. And the only reason I knew that is because I was volunteering. And I'm like, where are all your kids? And she was like, we had 7 kids because of the flu. And I knew nothing about it. Nothing. I don't know.
All
Mrs.
right.
Cunningham's
Any-
quiet.
No,
else?
that's all. That's
Okay.
fine.
All right.
I just,
Ms. Luke?
I do know parents want it, and I wanted to bring it to the board.
May I ask her a question before you go? Have you had a large number of parents?
I don't know, 10?
Just curious.
Ms. Luke?
I just wanted to thank, I spent the lunchtime period with Colonel Navarez from the Umatilla High School JR OTC, and his students hosted the event, and they gave a presentation about their program. It was completely professional, and the things that he has brought to the program just in the short 2 years that he's been there have been pretty impressive, especially under the COVID guidelines that we've been going through. So I wanted to thank him for his hospitality today. That was it.
Okay, I've got nothing. Meeting adjourned.